We have quite a few varieties of democracy in our world today. There's US example, there's British example, there's Indian example. But they are not ready for future yet. To move democracy forward into future is going to be a three-stage process. The first one will be a multi-party democracy, where elected representatives belong to many parties, not just 2 or 3. The second stage would be government by elected representatives who do not belong to any political parties. We'll abolish the parties and there will be a formula to elect the leader of the parliament. This will allow conscience vote. I'll come to this in a minute. The third stage would be administration by appointees. Now, before I link this video to a video I did about a year back, let me briefly mention John Locke, a well-known thinker from the glorious revolution era, 1688, which established parliament supremacy in Britain. He's well known for his work, Two Treatises of Government, although he never admitted in his lifetime that they were his work, because they were works of dissent. And had he admitted them, just like many other people of his time, he would have been executed, just like some of the people associated with the exclusion crisis at that time were. But this is just to show how important dissent is in democracy. Now, coming back to this video, I specifically mentioned we want the first step is multi-party democracy. I'll take 2 examples over here, one of Britain and the other of US, to explain the importance of this one. Theresa May called snap elections because she wanted a strong hand in Brexit talks. She wanted a strong majority. But as I always say, minorities do not have a voice in democracy. The best function for the best working of democracy, you do not need 1 or 2 strong parties, but you need many parties coming together to form government. This makes sure that every voice gets heard in a democracy. There's no such thing as a strong hand. Theresa May does not need a strong hand to talk about national interests at an international level. Doesn't matter what party is in the government, every party, even if it has minority interests on its main agenda, when it will come to protecting national interests at international level, they all will work with the same mindset. There is no party made up of leaders who want to destroy their own nation internationally. So it doesn't matter whether Theresa May has got a minority government. The people who are going to support her, they would still not be standing in her way. In fact, for best representation of minorities, you want many parties coming together so that they are always haggling with each other, so that a balanced approach, there's always a balanced approach to issues, and no part of community's interests are sidelined. You need multi-party democracies. I'll talk on this in a minute when I talk about US as well. But the thing is that any political party that does not take care of national interests at international level, say some party was to do a dog thing with Brexit talks, they risk losing their electoral vote for committing a democratic suicide. So you should never worry about your nation's interests simply because you have many parties forming a government. In fact, as I said, it's best when you have many parties so that they are always haggling for a balanced approach to different issues so that no community's interests are sidelined. So always go for small minority or regional parties and do not vote for major parties. Do not vote for national parties. It is not in your interest as a nation. Think of US. In last elections, if you were to believe media, there were only 2 people going head-on in debates, Hillary Clinton and Mr. Donald Trump. It was media literally telling people that these are the only 2 people you should be looking for when voting for president. Other candidates didn't even matter. This is actually harming the US democratic interests. think of it. You always say that elite controls the government, while it's the majority which is voting for the government, but it is the elite which is deciding what the government is going to do. Well, when the elite knows that there are only going to be two political parties that you are going to vote for, what they're going to do, they're just going to split into two groups. One group will support one party, the other group will support the other party. And the only thing that will happen after elections is, whichever group's party succeeds, they'll get more government contracts. But when it comes to the time of policy making, doesn't matter which party is in power, the policies are going to benefit elite on both sides. And the only people who are going to suffer is the one who have voted for it. So it's in your own interest to actually support smaller parties, to have a multi-party democracy. The first step in evolution of democracy is to have multi-party democracies everywhere. In my video that I mentioned earlier, I talked about how how our society evolved from crown being at the top and crown's will being the constitution of or law of the land under the crown and people under that law, to democracy where constitution became the top, crown came underneath the constitution, and its form changed from royalty to government of elected representatives, and people are under that government. I mentioned that the next stage would be constitution stays at the top and people go underneath the constitution, while the government is brought up one step further down under the people, actually accountable to people, and rather than being government of elected representatives, it be administration by appointees. And I said that you need to stop there before you go one step further and people go on top of constitution, because then that's when chaos will follow and democracy will collapse. You need to watch that video for more detail. But anyway, coming back to this, at first step, once we have multi-party democracies, the second step is to have democracies where there are no parties. We abolish parties and we just elect representatives. What that would mean is that every time there is a law to be passed or an issue to be discussed, there will always be conscience voting in the parliament. Right now what happens is your representatives vote according to party lines. So sometimes, and every party is not supported by majority of people. Some people support one party, some people support other party. So even when majority is not in support of a particular decision, that decision is often taken by the parliament, because your representatives are voting on on party lines and not making a conscience vote. To have a conscience vote, you actually need representatives who do not belong to any party but who are just voting on their conscience. So the next step in evolution is to abolish parties and have elected representatives. Of course, the question arises, who will be the head of the parliament in that case? Well, you can have a formula based on education and say age, experience, etc. You can go for a United States model where people elect the head of parliament or president directly, or you could have this formula where the top 5 elected representatives that people have elected, they stand for a vote in the parliament, and whoever the other representatives vote, one vote per representative, depending upon who wins the vote, that becomes a leader. That could be a way, or there could be another way, but that's definitely the next step. The final step which will lead to the ultimate evolution of democracy is when you stop electing representatives but appointing administrators. What does that mean? Right now, every citizen has a duty to serve on jury in Australia as well as United States. Every citizen has a duty to serve in army when called for. Well, every citizen should have a duty to administer the country when appointed for that as well. You need to develop a course or education which every citizen has to finish so that they are prepared for the job whenever they are appointed to do it. And then you set up a criteria based on which you appoint people for one single term, say 5-year term. And while they are serving the country by running the administration, if they were doing a job, their job should be kept safe for that time. If they were running a business, their business should be run for them at the same time, during that time. But once they have run the administration for one term, then they should be allowed to go back. And of course, I would suggest them living those 5 years in Big Brother style houses, where all their actions are open and visible to public, so that there's full accountability to public. That's the last stage of evolution of democracy. And of course, in that case, you can have a formula to have a sort of not a head of the parliament, but a council which actually takes care of international affairs or other affairs. Of course, this works in conjunction with the model that I have proposed for one world, but I'm not saying that everyone should adopt it. People should have a choice. Communities should have a choice. As I said, if they want to be socialist, they can be socialist. If they want to be capitalist, be capitalist. Be monarchy, community's choice. I should have no problem what another community wants to have as their system their political system. That's none of my business. They want to live there. It's their land. They are going to live there. They have every right to decide what they're going to have there. So think, people. Think.